At this stage in the project, I have to create a template for the new fuel tanks. The old fuel tanks had to be chopped up and cut up in order to get them out. So creating new fuel tanks based on the precise dimensions of the old fuel tanks would be kind of a fool's game. So right now I've got this bit of styrofoam clad in foil that I traced off the biggest end of the old fuel tank, and what I'm doing in this shot is cutting chunks out of the styrofoam to see if I can get it up into that section there. If you look at the template, you can see it's got black tape on it. That's because I've cut pieces out and taped them back in because they didn't work. So at this point I'm very close to finding the optimal position. You can see that that black hose and the stainless steel and the wire are in the way. Here's a better shot of what I'm dealing with. That hose is the exhaust. That wire is the light, the aft light, and the stainless steel piece hanging down is an old strap holding the previous tanks in place. So you can see here I had to cut the left-hand top corner off of the tank in order, or off this template piece in order to get the tank up in there. So having determined the correct shape for the end of the tank, I can go back to the shop and fabricate the complete tank, which is what I'm doing here. I've got a friend and he's got a nice shop that we can work inside, and he's done a lot of fabrication work. So right here we are taking measurements off the old tank. You can't see it in this shot, and then from that we're recreating a template for the new tank. It was quite an arduous process, and I've done a time lapse because you don't need to see the mind-numbing boredom of us putting this thing together. But it probably took us a couple of hours to get the pieces right. You can see it's such an odd shape. It's not square, it's not triangle, it's kind of a squashed triangle shape, which makes fabricating it really awkward. But I wanted to fabricate a template, make a template of the complete tank to test fit it in through the cockpit hatch and up into the place where it will live permanently before making it out of aluminum, because aluminum is kind of expensive, and if something goes wrong, if it doesn't fit, then it's got to be cut up and reconfigured. So easier to do it with a bit of styrofoam than with aluminum. So right here you can see we're getting very close to the final product. By cutting the topmost corner off, in terms of volume, I think I've only lost maybe 2 or 3 gallons worth. It's a 38-gallon tank, so the actual volume lost by doing that is... Yesterday I created a template for the end of the fuel tank that will hopefully be the correct shape for me to be able to work the fuel tank into position. But before going ahead and getting metal cut and welded up for the tank, I decided it would probably be best to create a model of the tank, sort of a template model, if you will, and attempt to insert that into the space that the tank's going to go into. It'd be an awful lot cheaper. I think it's about $10 for the material that I used to create the model, as opposed to $500 for the metal and welding. So here it is. So here's the completed tank. I've actually got it on board the boat, and in a moment I'm going to try and fit it down into the cockpit hatch area. The hatch is just about the same size, height and width, as the tank, and you can see that the odd shape that it is kind of really, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it, kind of rhombus, triangle, squished. So given that there's not much light down below, I've got my work lights rigged up so that I can actually see what I'm doing. I've got my generator going, and this is attempt 1003. This is not the first attempt. I've actually edited out a lot of trial and error trying to get this thing to fit in properly. I knew it would fit, but it was just a matter of putting it in the right sequence, and that's how it has to go in. I basically have to straddle the thing and lay it down flat, and then once it's laying down flat, lift up the front end and work it up into that hole like this. And there you have it. That was probably an hour and a half worth of work trying to get that thing up in there. You can see that upside down U pipe. That is actually the exhaust pipe coming off of the manifold of the engine, and it is right in front of the port side tank. But the hose, or that pipe, goes down into a water collector bottle, and then there's a hose that goes from the bottle to the aft around the back of the engine, and then up into the fuel tank area. I actually had to remove the hose to get the tank in there. I also had to remove that stainless steel strap, and I couldn't, well, I could have removed the wire, but I didn't want to cut and have to reconnect it. But I got it in there. You can see how awkward it is. Now when it comes time to putting the metal tank in there, it's going to be more difficult than this because of weight. Styrofoam is very light, and I can toss this thing around with one hand, but the aluminum will probably be 55, 60 pounds worth. So that's going to be another challenge. So what I'm doing in this shot is removing more of the foam insulation that a previous owner had installed. There was a lot of it on the hull, on the inside of the hull, which I've removed, and I'm currently cutting it back in order to get at hardware in that, I don't know what you call it, locker. Here you can see I'm taking the old exhaust hose out. I don't know why it goes around the engine and then up over the fuel tank and then back to the aft. There's probably a good 14 feet of hose. And as you can see from the condition that the hose is in, I'm glad I did take it out because it was getting threadbare from age and heat, and it needed to be replaced. So I doubt that I'm going to route it the way it was. I'll just take it from the coolant collector, the plastic tank. You can't see it in this shot, it's down by my feet. And then take it straight aft and out. So having gotten that out and a lot of the foam out, I can now move on to cleaning up the space where the tank will live permanently. There's a lot of rust in there from the old tank. A lot of rust and grime, and it's really kind of a nasty little dirty hole to have to work in, but that's what you get when you buy an old boat, right? It's not a new boat. You don't expect things to be pristine. And a series of previous owners, I would think, have probably just ignored the fact that the starboard tank, the one I'm working on in this shot, had been rusted out. They just left it and ignored it. and carried on with the port tank because the port tank worked. So in this shot you can see that once that hose is out of the way and the steel strap is out of the way, the tank goes up in there relatively painlessly. I didn't want to push and shove too hard because styrofoam's soft and it can break. But that's it. It's sitting on its butt just like I intended it to. There you can see the clearances, and here's that whole pipe I was telling you about. You can see the reinforcement wire is actually loose. That's just terrible. That's just an accident waiting to happen. Waiting to pump raw seawater from the hose back into the bilge. And you see how long that is. Right, so there's the little plastic collector tank that the hose is connected to at the back end of the motor. That's the collar that the hose fits over. And that is what's left of the exhaust hose that goes outboard. So you can see it goes basically from where my feet go straight back to the aft here and then outboard.